Oh, hello. Today we are starting on a project I am so excited about. I'm not sure how long this is going to take me to do, but it's something that I have been wanting to do and I've been waiting for the right inspiration to hop on it. So if you guys will remember, last year I did a reading recommendations from another booktuber. That time I did Bookish Thoughts. And the next person I've wanted to do was Ashley from Bookish Realm, because it's hard. It's hard to pick just one person who fits the bill, but Ashley would definitely be up there in terms of, if you like my reading taste, you should go check out Ashley, because she is an omnivore. She reads a lot. We read a lot of the same genres and we often agree on books. So I think she's definitely up there. Like Jean, there are definitely things that are not as similar between me and Ashley's reading taste. For instance, she reads a lot more comics and graphic novels than I do. I don't really read serialized comics. I guess the only one might be Monstrous, but kind of gets bound up as a graphic novel. But that's a big part of what she does. So that's a difference. But yeah, in general, I think we have super similar tastes. So I felt like this would be another good person to do this kind of project with. And I've been waiting for a recommendation video or a TikTok or whatever that I was going to be like, yes, this is the project. And I found it because a few weeks ago, she posted a nonfiction books by BIPOC women post on Instagram, and she had a couple of little slides in here. When I was looking through, I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect, because I am currently in the middle of Mediocre by Ijoma Eluo. That was one of the books. I was going to be reading that anyway for Jess's book Communa Read. And so with that, I would have already read 4 of the 10 books that are on this recommendation list. So by the time I'm filming this, I will have finished Mediocre. So here are my current rankings of the books that she is recommending. And then on top of that, there's an additional 6 books, all of which either I had heard of before and had been interested in, or I hadn't heard of before but sounded good. So I have read, by the time I get going on the project, will have read Thick by Tressie McMillan Cottom, Mediocre by Ijoma Eluo, Persepolis by Marianne Satrapi, and Ace by Angela Chen. All of them I enjoyed, and all of them were things that I'm glad that I have read for nonfiction. So yeah, I'm always looking for great nonfiction recommendations. I have read several of Ashley's recommended nonfiction picks over the years, including Ace. I read that upon her and I guess Bethany's recommendation. The other books that we are going to read for this project are Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall, Twisted by Emma DeBeery, How Dare the Sun Rise by Sandra, oh gosh, this font is so light and it's a long name, Uringiyamana, I think might be what that is saying. I got I Was Their American Dream, which is a graphic memoir by Malaka Garib, Bad Fat Black Girl by Cecily Bowen, and In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. So I had Bad Fat Black Girl, In the Dream House, and Hood Feminism all already kind of on my TBR of yeah, I want to get to that at some point. And then the other 3 I didn't. So what I'm gonna do is, once I get through Mediocre, that will kick off this project. And I am going to try to read most of these from the library, because if you don't know, Ashley is a librarian and I really love getting audiobook nonfiction from the library. And then if I enjoy it, I'll pick up a physical copy. The exception is graphic memoirs or graphic novels, because, well, first of all, as an audiobook, it wouldn't work well. But also, I mostly do ebooks from the library at this point, and I don't really like reading ebooks on digital. I like to have them physically. So I did go ahead and pick up a copy of this for the project, but the rest I'm going to try to get from the library in honor of Ashley, and just because that's in general what I like to do with nonfiction. So I'm excited. There's a nice mix in here of sort of cultural history, sociological type nonfiction, and then memoir-ish based nonfiction. So I think between all of these recommendations, we have a good variety of perspectives, topics, and I really love and trust Ashley's recommendations, so I'm expecting that I'm gonna get something out of all of these. Even if they don't end up being my favorites, I'm gonna get something out of them. So I'm excited. I'll check back in with you when I'm ready to get going. So I have finished Mediocre, which is very good. So it's time to get going on the first book for this project. And I started it on a day where this book, which is Bad Fat Black Girl by Cecily Bowen, by Cecily Bowen, going is the only good thing that's happened to me so far today. I got up early to go get a latte, and the line was twice as long as when I go at my normal time, so lesson learned there. I went to get gas while I was out because I was early still, so I was like, okay, great, I'll go ahead and fill up. The gas station was very, like, it was at the bottom of the barrel, however that works, so it was taking forever. I waited 10 minutes and only could get like 5 gallons, so I just was like, screw this. So I got home and I was taking off my jacket and I knocked over that entire latte. So now I'm making myself some coffee. I had to clean that up. So yeah, I feel like today is not my day so far. As I said, the only good thing that is going is this book. So I am absolutely loving Bad Fat Black Girl. So good. It reminds me a lot of, so when I was in grad school, I did a paper about Beyonce's use of imagery in combination with her lyrics in her self-titled album and the accompanying like film of all of the videos. One of the concepts I ran into when I was researching that paper is this idea of percussive feminism, which is also sometimes called hip-hop feminism, but really I feel like this is sort of like the next evolution of that, which she is calling trap feminism. And it's basically, at least percussive, oh, let's hold please. My tummy has not been feeling great recently, so one of my obsessions and the only things that sounds yummy to me is butter with a little bit of jam on an English muffin or a crumpet. So good. Anyway, so percussive feminism, basically the idea of it being hip-hop stereotypically in its language and imagery has been very misogynistic, particularly towards Black women. So percussive feminism or hip-hop feminism is taking those images, that language, and kind of like owning it, reappropriating it, and embodying it, owning it, using that as a source of power. So it's the same sort of, I think it's third wave feminism or fourth wave feminism, where instead of looking at a stripper or a sex worker as someone being oppressed by men, you instead look at them as women who are exploiting the male gaze for their own gain. Now, I think on both instances of this can get pretty dicey at times, but I think it's a very interesting idea. I remember at the time, I mean, I think that that's definitely some of the things Beyonce was doing on that album, particularly with, oh gosh, Beyonce. But I remember at the time citing Nicki Minaj's Looking Ass Inward as the video as being a very good embodiment of this idea of like weaponizing the male gaze against men. And all that to say, I think that this is where Cecily Bowen is going, and I'm into it. I really, really loved her first, well, I love the introduction, and then the first chapter is all about her experience as a fat woman and like not having, both being fat and also not having the idealized like thick version of being fat. I really related to that even as a white fat girl. So I'm way into this, looking forward to hearing more. Oh, and sorry, I just hit play and she immediately started talking about Megan Thee Stallion, and I was like, yes, okay, yeah. So Megan Thee Stallion, Cardi B, great examples of the same idea. WAP is both hilarious, but also I think a great example of what I had previously seen referred to as percussive feminism, but also what I think she is talking about is trap feminism. So there you go. Well, okay. I flew through Bad Fat Black Girl. So good. definitely in a 4.5, possibly a 5. So oh my gosh, okay, so I'm just so excited because now I have also started, because the next book that was available is Hood Feminism, so I'm about 20% of the way into that, and these are like the perfect pairing. So I'm not sure if Bad Fat Black Girl is going to be 4.5 or 5, but I can already tell that the combined experience of reading it with Hood Feminism is going to be a 5-star reading experience. They just like perfectly pair. Okay. Bad Fat Black Girl reminds me a lot of Eloquent Rage, but like the next iteration of it. Same with Hood Feminism. I feel like Eloquent Rage and Bad Feminist and like Hunger walked so that these two books could run, because to me it's just indicative of the fact that the conversation has really evolved even in the last few years from when those books were written. So like sort of a kind of pre-Trump to a post-Trump world, and a pre-2020 protest to a post-2020 protest world. I just think that the conversation has evolved a lot, and it's really cool to see how the particularity of these women's experiences and how they are able to articulate that in an increasingly complicated sort of philosophical framework of gender, race, sexuality, socioeconomic class. Like, I just think that it's exciting to me to read these because the conversations are able to be more and more complicated for a wide audience, because both of these are not academic books, though I think they definitely have some academic rigor, particularly Hood Feminism. It's more that there is an audience and there is an appetite for that level of sophisticated analysis that is just exciting to me to see. And it was interesting because the epilogue of Bad Fat Black Girl mentioned that when she was first shopping this book, the thought was like, well, this isn't very broadly applicable, and really one of the audiences for these kinds of books are affluent white women. That's me. And I think that this is just, again, such an interesting moment of realizing that, yeah, like, okay, my experiences are not one-to-one with Cecily, like, at all, but I definitely had so many moments of personal connection with her story in terms of her experience as a woman and as a fat woman, for sure. I think my empathetic imagination for her identity is also a queer woman, and a woman who has been a sex worker, and a woman who grew up in the hood. I feel very weird saying the hood, which is why I put it in scare quotes, but you know, that's how she describes it, so we'll just roll with it. But like, it's just such a reminder to me that this is what the power of personal storytelling does, which is it connects people who maybe don't have a ton of things in common, but we all have human experiences that other humans want to connect with. Anyway, this is a great example of things that, yes, I am learning from, but I'm also just enjoying what high quality works of nonfiction both of these books are. And like I said, together, I feel like Cecily's story is much more personal, like it's heavier on the memoir element than the sort of analysis element, though it definitely is there. And I personally just love nonfiction that includes analysis of pop culture, so I really liked all of the stuff she did with that. Whereas Hood Feminism is more heavy on the analysis side, with, it seems like, some of Mickey's stories kind of supporting her overall analysis. So yeah, this is a fantastic reading experience. I would definitely say that as of right now, Bad Fat Black Girl is at the top of my list. We'll see where Hood Feminism ends up, but together, perfect pairing. And now I'm going to continue to listen while I put up some shelves over my nightstand. So I don't know if you guys have been able to tell this from my videos, but I'm nesting more and more recently. Didn't really know what I wanted my bedroom to be like, and I think as time has gone on, I've had more of a vision for it, and I want it to be cozier. I think I was going for more of a kind of stripped down vibe for a while because I thought that would be more peaceful, and it is in a certain way, but I like having like the bookshelf there. I really have enjoyed having my albums up. The vibes in here are increasingly getting towards what feels very cozy to me. So I'm gonna put a couple of shelves up over my nightstand and put some like pictures and some of my like pretty books on it. So that is gonna be my project whilst I continue to listen to Hood Feminism. It is great so far. I'm expecting it likely is gonna be another 5-star. I've not finished it yet, but I am actually gonna order both those books in physical form today because I'm just enjoying them so much. So I'm really glad. I don't know that I would have gotten to Bad Fat Black Girl. It was on my radar because I heard both Ashley and Jess Owens talking about how much they enjoyed it. I think it was Jess who said that. Yeah, that feels right. So it was on my radar, but this was definitely the push to read it. And then I've been meaning to get to Hood Feminism for a while, and I'm glad that this finally gave me the push to do it. So far, the recommendations from Ashley are immaculate. Okay, so what do we think? This is my preliminary styling, and I think I like it. I get to have some of my favorite pretty covers facing out in a way that I can enjoy them more. Yeah, I think overall, it's the vibe I was going for. We're getting there. I have a piece of art that's gonna go on that wall, and then I might do another bookshelf underneath it, like a floating shelf kind of situation. But yeah, I think that this was a good step in my overall journey to have a cozier bedroom. Okay, it's been a little while since I've checked in with you guys, but I finally finished Hood Feminism while I was out and about to go to the doctor and do a quick grocery store run, because theoretically we're getting a big ice storm tonight, and we just don't have the infrastructure to clear that shit out. So if and when that happens, it's a big problem in these here parts. So I've loaded up on the essentials, including my current obsession with English muffins. I've got my stockpile of that ready to go. And Hood Feminism is just great. I mean, it's hard for me on some of these ones where I just love them to have a lot of like meaningful things to say other than like, wow, that was great. I learned a lot from it. I have a lot to think about and like process, because it's not, I think, really good nonfiction. Yes, you have your immediate reaction, which is, oh, I really enjoyed that. That was so great. But then you also have sort of like an unfolding processing of like, oh yeah, I remember them talking about this. Like you see something, I don't know, on the news or whatever, and you're like, yeah, oh, that connects with this thing I was reading. So I guess my takeaway from Hood Feminism is just that so many things are feminist issues or like womanist issues that don't often get conceptualized as such. So it's just, it like is really good for awareness raising. Like one of the early chapters talks about, for instance, like gun control as a feminist issue, which makes sense even just from general like domestic violence kind of situations, but then specifically in the context of the Black American experience, it also makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I don't know. So many good things to think about. I think where I've landed is that I would give both Bad Fat Black Girl and Hood Feminism 4.5s. And then like with them as a combined reading experience, that is a 5-star. It's kind of similar to how I felt about Catch Me If You Can and She Said, which I read back to back a couple of years ago, which were both about the Harvey Weinstein cases. Both of them I felt like were 4.5-star books, but the experience of reading them back to back was 5-star. I feel pretty similarly about this. So great. This is going fantastically. Great job, Ashley. And then my next pick is going to be How Dare the Sun Rise, I think is what it's called, which is the memoir, or one of the memoirs that I have to read. So that came up from the library, so that is what I will read next. But so far, this is a rousing success. Oh my gosh, guys. So I started How Dare the Sun Rise when I was out making a Trader Joe's and Target run. And this was a mistake, because the first chapter of this book, I'm going to try very hard not to cry talking about this, but is a depiction of essentially our memoirist's family being killed, Ari. And it is so much, and I was in Target crying. Sorry, okay. You know, like in All Too Well, when she says, this is like, we've been in a Target toilet paper aisle, some employee asking me what happened, this book. So I think I have a better sense of what the mood I need to be in to read this is. And I think I need to be in a flow state. So I have a bunch of boxes I need to break down because, long story, basically they had to suspend curbside recycling for a month. It's resuming, and so I have a bunch of buildup that I need to take care of. So I think I'm gonna put this on and let myself cry while I'm listening to it. Yeah, it's a lot. I guess I'm feeling conflicted about my own emotional response to this, of reading this book, but it is a lot right out the gate. So we'll see how I do as it progresses. Okay, actually, I can't see you guys very well right now, so let's put on some glasses. Yeah, so I had a productive day of listening to the audiobook, and I actually got through it all. Good motivation to persevere on some chores I had been putting off, so got a bunch of laundry done, got a bunch of dishes done, etc. Yeah, how to talk about this book without crying again. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. Sorry, I'm already choking up just even thinking about talking about this book. So I would say the story of this is incredible and so moving. So I don't know if I actually explained what this book was about because I was just a crying mess earlier. So let me try to tell you the story of Sandra's life. So she was born in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and her family, in terms of their kind of like ethnic group, are Congolese Tutsi. I think there may be another tribal name, but basically Tutsis who are living in the Congo. Whew. And if you know anything about the Rwandan genocide of the early 90s, you know that the Tutsis were involved in that. I was not aware of the ongoing plight of the Tutsi people in that region. And Sandra, the opening story that had me crying in the toilet paper aisle of Target, is that her family was in a UN refugee camp. They had left Congo for Burundi to go to a UN refugee camp. And at the refugee camp, there was a massacre, basically, of the Tutsi people who were staying there. And her family was at the camp, and her younger sister and her aunt and her cousins were killed. She very narrowly escaped also being killed. That is harrowing, and it's a lot. I have a really soft spot in my heart for that part of the world. I think we all have world events that really stick with us in history, and the Rwandan genocide is definitely one for me. I first became aware of that in high school when Hotel Rwanda came out. I read, some books on the history of that part of the world, but that whole topic really just hurts my heart. So hearing about that and just not realizing that it had been an ongoing conflict, I guess I just hadn't heard about that specific incident. So anyway, that very much touched my heart and was very movingly conveyed. The other thing there's several interesting things about her life. One is that her oldest brother was a child soldier who was gone for a good chunk of her childhood, and her family spent a lot of time and energy trying to find him and get him back, and they eventually did. And then after the massacre, victims of the massacre were eligible through the UN to eventually immigrate to the US, which is what happened. So she also details her experience as being a refugee and an immigrant in the US. She talks about kind of the culture shock of being in the US, and also essentially conceptualizing herself as Black for the first time, and the idea of race being imposed on her in a way that it wasn't when she was living in the Congo. So that was super interesting. Yeah, this is just a really, really moving story. It's one that I would highly recommend to people in terms of just I don't know, I think that there's some really interesting themes in this, because also I'm just thinking it hits most hot button topics you can think of. We've got politics, we've got race and social justice, we've got immigration. I thought it was an interesting layer to the fact that when the massacre was happening, her attackers were singing Christian songs that she also sang in church. So this idea of religion, and we have the same religion, and yet this is happening. It's just, there's lots of layers to the story. And this is a story that is aimed at young adults. And my nieces are too young to read this right now, but this is certainly something that I will give to them when they come of age, because I just think it has a lot of really thoughtful elements to it that are great for young readers. This is a hard read, but I think a really worthwhile one. And obviously I was very moved by it. I think it's so hard to rate this kind of a book because it's I'm not trying to rate her life. Her story is a 5-star story. I think as a book, I don't know that it's the best memoir I've ever read or the best memoir I could imagine for that audience in terms of the writing. So in that sense, I would want to give it a 4-star. So I don't know. I really enjoyed this. I would say it was very emotional So I noticed that the next book up from my library is from Carmen Maria Machado, and if I'm remembering rightly, I think I've heard that that is a pretty intense memoir. So I think I'm gonna go to the graphic memoir that I have next, because I believe it's also aimed at younger readers, and it's also about sort of like second generation immigration, so that kind of seems like a good follow-on. But anyway, How Dare the Sunrise was not on my radar at all. I would not have read it without this challenge, and I'm really glad I did. I feel like it was very enriching and a very challenging and emotional read, but I can completely see why Ashley recommends it. And okay, that took me out. That was a lot. But anyway, I'm halfway through, and I'm so glad I'm doing this because I'm reading some great books, and I'll catch you when I make some progress on I Was Their American Dream. Well, hello. I have finished another book. I Was Their American Dream by Malaka Garib, and I thought that this was for middle grade or young adult, but I don't actually think that it is. But it is a graphic novel memoir of Malaka and her experience as a first-generation American. Her mother immigrated to the US from the Philippines, and her father immigrated to the US from Egypt. That dynamic creates a lot of interesting kind of tensions for Malaka as she is growing up and kind of conceptualizing herself as sort of third culture kid. Her dad is Muslim, her mother is Catholic, and eventually her dad moves back to Egypt. So then there's also kind of that element. She's exploring the fact that she feels sort of like not really a part of anywhere. There's some really good spreads in here talking about, so like for instance, I liked this one where it was talking about, I quickly learned the code of conduct, and talking about how for each of these three identities, she has different expectations that people are giving to her. Like there's lots of little asides about learning Tagalog versus Arabic. And then basically the idea of I was their American dream. So her parents had all these ideas about what it meant to be American, and a lot of that she sort of internalizes and feels like it's her job to sort of live that for them. And yeah, it's good. I don't know that this is like super remarkable, at least for me, but I enjoyed that this felt a little less formal, especially in terms of some of the like drawing styles and stuff. It felt, I don't know, kind of more personal. Sorry, someone called me and I don't remember what I was telling you. Basically just that I did like this. Oh, I think I was talking about that I kind of liked the more informal illustration style because I felt like it was a little bit more personal. I really liked the section of her kind of talking about discrimination in her workplace, or sort of her perception of sort of not being in the know. Like this has microaggression bingo. I thought that was cool. There's also lots of little jokes. So where was that? This cracked me up. There's like this lady talking to her and it says TPS report and the thing that she's holding, that made me laugh. Yeah, there's also, she ends up with this southern white guy from Nashville named Darren. And so I don't know. Yeah, this was charming. This was lovely. I don't know that this is like the best memoir I've ever read or the most memorable, but I enjoyed it. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have picked it up without the recommendation, and I thought it was enjoyable. I thought it was good. I'd give it probably like 3.5 stars. And it was a good palate cleanse, I will say, in terms of intensity from How Dare the Sunrise. So I think that was a good palate cleanse. And then now I'm ready to go full-hearted into the Carmen Maria Machado title, which I've heard is absolutely devastating. So I'm gonna strap in for that. Got that on audio from the library, so I should go ahead and get to it. So that will be next, but 4 down, 2 to go. Hello. So, I have finished another book. I listened to all of In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado today. Oh boy, it is so good, but also very intense. And it's, so in terms of what it's about, domestic abuse, that really is the focus of the memoir. Carmen Maria Machado gets into a relationship with a woman who really, I mean, it's like the classic domestic abuse scenario where she love bombs her and builds her up and starts to isolate her. Over time, the script really starts to flip, and it becomes incredibly emotionally abusive, and then also like physically abusive in terms of throwing things. And so it's a very violent situation. And really what we're experiencing in the the memoir is Carmen Maria Machado's processing of what that relationship was like. What makes this so powerful is the language. Like, it's so beautifully written. It's very lyrical. The imagery is just absolutely beautiful. The epilogue had this little extended description of her time when she was actually writing the memoir, and it was she was staying in rural Oregon, and there's like this wildfire happening, and just like the language in that was so beautiful. It felt almost, I listened to the audiobook, which I believe it's her narrating it, and it felt almost like poetry, like almost like spoken word poetry kind of vibe to it, because it's just the language washes over you, and yet what's being described is so violent and so disturbing. But I don't know, I felt like it was beautiful and then also kind of restrained, because I think she allows you to make a lot of inferences about kind of what her emotional state is in certain places. So I felt like it was one of those reading experiences where the author is like asking the reader to participate in the storytelling in terms of making inferences and kind of connecting the dots. And it's also structured in a really interesting way, because the dream house is this place where she was living with this girlfriend. It becomes almost like this mythical place, like a haunted mythical place. Every chapter, some of which are longer and some of which can literally just be like a sentence on a page kind of a thing, it will say like the dream house as romance novel, the dream house as apocalypse, and it kind of, the title of the chapter and then the anecdote she tells with it sort of creates another layer of meaning. So I don't know that I've ever read a memoir structured quite that way before, but anyway, absolutely beautiful. I think it does make me also think through like the different ways that memoirs work and like kind of the different approaches to memoir, which we've actually seen over the course of this project. So this I would describe as having a very specific literary intent to it. So it's memoir not only as communicating an experience, but it's very specifically memoir as art. Whereas, for instance, I finally got my copy of Bad Fat Black Girl. Parnassus had a copy of it, of all places, so I ordered it up from them. But anyway, this I think has more of an intent to comment and like sort of raise social awareness. Like, I mean, if you look at the characterization, it's called social science, feminism, and feminist theory. So like this is, I think, more specifically about using a life story to then extrapolate onto like larger social forces, which I'm not saying that In the Dream House has no intent to do that, but that's not, I think, as much of a focus. This is like memoir as personal storytelling in aim of a broader argument or a broader kind of social goal. I think you can even tell that based on like specific topics and not strictly linear in the timeline. So I think of this as more personal story as illustrative of broader social commentary versus like How Dare the Sun Rise and I Was There, American Dream are more linear in their storytelling mostly, and they really are kind of telling a whole life story. So they become more just like autobiography. Doesn't mean that there's not art and skill in the telling of it, but it is more like, here's my story and I'm trying to tell you like my whole life story. So we've kind of had 3 different types of memoirs, I feel like, in this project so far, and all of them are perfectly reasonable kind of goals of a memoir. But in terms of literature, I would definitely say In the Dream House is definitely meant to be literature, and I think it very much succeeds in that. So I would definitely give this 4.5 stars. This is really, I mean, just the writing alone is amazing, and then the story and kind of the way she tells her story is very powerful, very moving, emotional. Yeah, I mean, it was just super, super good. So it's a heavy read and a heavy topic, so just know that going into it. I only have one more book left to read, and that is Tangled, which I believe I'm gonna get on Scribd, so I can get that whenever I want. And I took tomorrow off, thank God. I'm so excited. And so I will have some time to listen to that while I'm making a run to the used bookstore and doing a grocery run. So definitely get started on it. If I get in the groove, maybe I'll even finish tomorrow. Possibly, we'll see. But that is the last one, so I'll check in once I've gotten going on that. Alrighty, so I have been out and about. I went and saw Death on the Nile, which I was not super impressed with. I feel like I'm gonna go inside and make a full download of my thoughts on that because I have to share it with someone. But, you know, it was a thing that happened, and I secretly kind of love trashing the Kenneth Branagh adaptations of Poirot. So I also started last night and then continued today because I also went to Trader Joe's and I had to drop off some furniture at the Goodwill drop off. So I was running errands and in my car, etc. So I am in Twisted, which I think I was calling it Tangled, but it's not Tangled, it's Twisted. And yeah, I would say I'm not like vibing with it fully. Yeah, we'll see. I don't think that this is one that I'm personally connecting with as much. So I'll check back in when I've made more progress or when I finish, kind of what my final thoughts are. Nothing against the book, nothing concrete. I just, yeah, for some, you know when you just sort of aren't clicking with a book? I feel like this is a book I'm just not clicking with for some reason, but I'm trying to keep an open mind. We'll see if I kind of get in the groove with it a little bit more. Alrighty, so I've had a busy day today. I went and got a haircut, which I'm hiding from you right now because I always put my hair up when I'm in a mask because I went to the used bookstore. Whew, it was a reminder of why I don't come here on the weekend unless I get here first thing because it was so crowded and so stressful. But it was successful in that I made 40 bucks. I still have some trade-in credit and I found 2 books. I found the Borders editions of Evil Under the Sun. I used to have the full collection of this, and then for reasons probably related to space, but I got rid of all of them. So when I see them in nice condition, I grab them. And then I also got another Anthony Horowitz mystery. Since I really loved Magpie Murders so much, I've been grabbing some of his stuff, so I got The Sentence is Death. Pretty successful outing, I feel like. Got rid of a bunch of books, only bringing 2 back, made cash, and I still have a little bit of trade-in credit left, so pretty successful all around. Okay, so I made a lot more progress in Twisted, and I'm vibing with it a lot more. I must have just been in a weird mood when I was last reading. I'm actually really enjoying it, and it's exactly what it says. It's a history of African hair, basically, and the perspective of the author is that she is Irish, but she's biracial, so part of what she's exploring is her kind of context of being in her skin tone, but having kind of traditionally African textured hair, kind of like more kinkier or coilier hair, essentially like the colorism around that. So it's a very interesting history. It's a very interesting discussion on her part, and now that I guess I kind of knew what I was getting into, I'm just flowing with it better for whatever reason. Sometimes when I'm reading a book that I know I should like, but I'm just not feeling it fully, it's good for me to not do it as a one-day read, because if I come back to it, often I will get along with it a lot better. So that is the case for sure. I'm gonna go home and eat some lunch, and then I'm gonna do some editing on this vlog, actually. I think I'll probably finish this one today because I often listen to audiobooks while I'm doing my first pass at editing. So I think I'm probably going to be able to finish this today, and then we can wrap this whole thing up because yeah, I think we're almost there. All right, I finished Twisted, and I really enjoyed it. I think, again, this is a great example of sometimes when you are not in the right frame of mind, when you're getting started with a book, you may get the wrong impression, but if you keep an open mind and try again a different day, you can end up really enjoying it, because I definitely really enjoyed this one. I'd say that this was probably my top 4-star pick for this challenge, because it is basically integrating philosophy and sort of like the history of ideas with the history of African hair. And I just thought that that was a really fascinating take. So for instance, we learn about different African sort of like religious traditions or folk traditions surrounding hair and beauty, and how that compares and contrasts against more European-based ideas of that. She talks about, like, one section that I thought was really interesting was talking about the idea of African hair care being very time-consuming, and how even the notion of time consumption is a very capitalist and European-based concept. And then she would talk about how, like, specifically in Nigeria and some of their traditions around basically this idea that time is created, not that time is used, which I just thought was really interesting. I ordered a copy of it because I want to reread that section and take some notes before I make a commentary video about kind kind of like the history and future of work. But I thought that that was a super interesting idea. And I think part of what this made me, well, I had like two aha moments, both of which I feel kind of dumb that it took till now for this to like really crystallize for me, but such is ever-growing awareness of our own limitations of the way that we perceive the world. One, I had never really understood, just on sort of an instinctual level, why some white people found natural African hairstyles, and specifically African American hairstyles. So for instance, like an afro, which she goes into explaining how that's more of an African American hairstyle than it is a traditional hairstyle in Africa, because she was talking a lot about how in Africa, the real tradition is around intricate designs and intricate braiding, etc. Anyway, but I never really understood how or why afros were seen as basically a statement or somehow being threatening, and therefore specifically in the context of the workplace being unprofessional. So like I'd heard sort of things about like how it was unkempt or whatever, I mean just bullshit, which I also was like, I don't understand this, but whatever. But specifically this idea of political connotation, it had never fully connected for me that especially, I think, people who are older than me perceive natural hairstyles as being a political statement in alignment with, like, maybe, for instance, the Black Power movement or the Black Panther movement. And, you know, while I'm actually pretty cool with those movements as well, even just aside from that, I just don't have that association with that approach to hair care for Black people. That just, like, again, kind of dumb that it took me this long to fully make that connection of, oh, I just don't have that instinctive connection between politics or a political movement and a hairstyle that I think people who are older than me have. The other thing that it made me reflect on is just kind of like the limitations of my own, you know, empathy for Black women's experiences with their hair, because I think, so when I was growing up, I grew up in a very white part of Tennessee. So basically the Appalachian area of Tennessee is very, very white. You can kind of think of it as a similar population of maybe like West Virginia. And because I was also going to a white evangelical school, I just frankly did not grow up with hardly any Black people. So it wasn't really until university that I encountered a lot of Black people in my day-to-day life. The person who ended up becoming my best friend, and our friendship started when we were living together, and then we bonded over our shared love of trashy VH1 reality shows, throwback to Flavor of Love. But anyway, so from living with her, that was really when I first got my first like awareness, like consciously paying attention to Black hairstyles, because I saw how she took care of her hair, and it really just was an education moment for me to think about it. But from that point on, like where I have like a conscious association with Black hairstyles, I've always just been like, I think they're all great. You do you. I always think it's so striking and cool when Black women will basically have like almost no hair. Like I think that looks really cool. I mean, just whatever. Weaves or wigs or whatever somebody is into, I think is great. But I think that this book made me realize just like what a position of privilege it is for me to even have at least a conscious acceptance of that, because this is just really an exploration of the history of how fucking complicated all of this is and how emotional it is. And I mean, I think about that with the standards of beauty that I feel more connected with. You know, I guess maybe the way to say it is, since I became aware of it, I have thought of Black hairstyle much the way that I think of makeup, which is different people have different styles. People who can do makeup in whatever style, I think is cool and is awesome that people take the time to master that skill. I think that that's sort of been my perception of Black hair. And I think that this book just made me really process and challenge that in and of itself, that attitude is very privileged, because it's not really coming from a place of truly doing the work to think through how fucking complicated it is to process all of these conflicting messages about what your hair should look like. You know, the pressures to have natural hair or to be natural, because that's like reclaiming your heritage, but then that doesn't just erase the history of, you know, oppressive European beauty standards that are not easily achievable for a lot of Black women who have like a coarser or like really tightly coiled texture. I don't know. Anyway, it just made me process my own privilege, which was good. Like, I mean, I just appreciated having my own awareness of that deepened. But yeah, even beyond that, I just think that this was a super fascinating history. And like I said, I really enjoyed the way that it was integrated with different philosophy or history of ideas from a different part of the world than I've ever really seen some of those ideas talked about. This makes me want to go seek out some kind of history of ideas of Africa to learn more just about different perceptions of time and what, you know, selfhood is. I don't know. It was enjoyable and enlightening as I expected it to be because I enjoy histories of like clothing and beauty and all of that. So I enjoyed that part. It was expansive to my own perceptions and limitations of my perceptions of the world, and it made me curious to learn more about the history of ideas of a place that I've not really sought that out before. So anyway, all in all, really good read. And also I enjoyed, once I got into it, I did end up enjoying the audiobook. So it's on Scribd. It wasn't at my library, but it was on Scribd, so you can get it there. I think that does it for the books. So I'll meet you guys back and we'll do one final little wrap up, but I think we did it. Go team. Alrighty, let's wrap this project up. So all in all, I mean, this has been a rousing success. I think this is one of the most successful challenge type videos I've ever done if we're looking purely at the numbers, because half of the 6 books that I read for this, I gave 4.5 stars to, which means they're favorites of the year. 2 I gave 4 stars to, both of which were very strong 4 stars, and then 1 I gave 3.5 to. So lowest, worst book, I guess technically for this reading round was I Was Their American Dream, but I still would give this a B+. It was still very good. The lowest rating overall is a B because I gave Thick by Tressie McMillan Cottom 3 stars when it first came out. Not because I didn't like the content, it was just something about the writing style with the content that didn't get along with me when I read it. But if that's the worst quote unquote book for this entire recommendation list, that's amazing. That's a B for me. And yeah, like unsurprisingly, this is a super strong round of recommendations. So I did read 6 books total for this challenge beyond the 4 that I'd already read prior to starting officially the challenge. And then of those 6, I bought 4 of them. So that's pretty solid. Well, I bought this one to read it, but I'm gonna unhaul this because I just don't think I'm gonna refer to it again. But I bought physical copies of Feminism and Bad Fat Black Girl, and then I have physical copies of Twisted and of In the Dream House on their way to me. So that's another metric of success, that even after having read them, I want to have physical copies. If we're talking about the book that, let's see here, the book that surprised me the most, it's hard to say. I wouldn't say In the Dream House or either of these surprised me because they were already on my radar and this basically just bumped me to get to it. I guess I would say either How Dare the Sun Rise, just because I wasn't expecting the content or just how emotional that book would make me, but also Twisted, just because first of all, I started off with it sort of on a bad foot, but then regained some ground with it. And then also I wasn't expecting it to be as much of a history of ideas as it ended up being. So those would probably be the most surprising. And then these 2 are definitely the best. If I had to pick a single favorite book, I would say Bad Fat Black Girl, but I would say these 2 together are a 5-star reading experience. I absolutely love both of these. The experience of reading them together, I feel like, was really lovely because I would say Bad Fat Black Girl is a memoir with a lot of analysis in it, and I would say that this is a social analysis with a lot of memoir in it. So I just think they complement each other super well, and yeah, it was just a great reading experience all around with those 2. But in general, this was a fantastic reading experience, period. I think I started off by saying that Ashley is somebody I would really recommend people follow if they enjoy my recommendations. Hopefully this illustrates why she is somebody who has just read a lot. She's also a librarian. She's also really good at understanding how to pick books for people based on what you're looking for and what you like, giving you a good recommendation. So hopefully this proved all the more why you should be following Ashley. So I will have information to her videos below, so you should definitely go give her a follow. And yeah, I think that will wrap this vlog up. I think it's gonna end up being a long one because I had a lot to say. But yeah, definitely let me know what you thought of any of the books if you've already read them. Definitely feel free to talk about how much you love Ashley, because yeah, why not? We stan Ashley here on this channel. And yeah, I think that will do it for me. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, and I think that will do it. I hope you're having an absolutely lovely day today, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!